Highlights from today's stories. The creepy photoshoot. I could feel his eyes studying me through the viewfinder, cataloging every detail as I posed for what should have been routine yearbook photos. The janitor's closet. The storage closet door clicked shut behind, my heart pounding. The door was locked from the other side. The music room escape. The abandoned music room piano played a perfect G minor chord, the exact moment I knew we weren't alone in the school after hours. Story 1. The creepy photoshoot. Junior year, 2018. They scheduled yearbook photos during 4th period. My slot happened to be right after lunch, which meant I was rushing back from Taco Bell with my friends. But whatever, yearbook photos were never a big deal at Westridge High. Our regular photographer, Mrs. Jenkins, was out sick. The school hired a last-minute replacement, a guy who introduced himself as, "Just call me Mark." He was maybe early 30s, clean cut, wearing a professional camera around his neck and carrying a heavy equipment bag. Mark set up in the empty classroom across from the cafeteria. When I walked in, he was adjusting a backdrop and some lighting. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, something cheap and too strong. "You must be Mia," he said, glancing at his clipboard. "Ready for your photo?" I nodded, dropping my backpack in the corner with a muffled thump. "Great smile," Mark said as I sat on the stool. "You're photogenic." The compliment felt weird, but I brushed it off. Photographers probably say that to everyone. As he adjusted the lighting, I noticed something odd. His eyes would lock onto mine through the viewfinder, holding my gaze for uncomfortably long moments. Each time the shutter clicked, a harsh mechanical sound in the quiet classroom. I could feel him studying me rather than simply taking a picture. The camera wasn't creating distance between us. It was somehow making his stare more intimate, more invasive. Tiny beads of sweat formed on my neck as I shifted on the stool. The room felt smaller with each passing minute. "Let's try something different," Mark suggested, moving closer. "These are just standard shots. With your look, we could do some portfolio quality portraits." My stomach tightened. "I'm good with the standard ones," I replied, my voice coming out higher than intended. But he insisted, stepping even closer to adjust my collar, his fingers lingering on my neck. They were cold and slimy with sweat, making me flinch slightly. "The yearbook committee would love some variety," he said, his breath warm against my ear. "I can make you look like a model." My mind raced between wanting to leave and not wanting to make a scene. What if I was overreacting? What if this was normal photographer behavior and I was just being paranoid? I reluctantly agreed to a few more shots, just wanting to get it over with. "Perfect," he murmured, taking picture after picture. The shutter clicked rapidly. Click, 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 like a metronome, counting the seconds of my discomfort. "Now turn slightly." "Yes, hold that." Something felt off about how intensely he was shooting me. The standard yearbook session was supposed to be quick. Sit, smile, next. But Mark had been shooting for almost 20 minutes, directing me with increasingly specific poses. "I think we have enough," I finally said, standing up. My legs felt wobbly. "Just a few more," he insisted, his voice taking on an edge. "These are turning out amazing." I checked my phone and realized I was now 15 minutes late to English. I told him I needed to go, grabbing my backpack. "Wait," Mark said, lowering his camera. "You could make good money modeling. Here's my card. Call me if you're interested." I took the card just to be polite and hurried out, the cool hallway air washing over me like relief. That should have been the end of it, but the next day, my friend Jessica showed me her yearbook proofs online. "Did you see yours yet?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I hadn't. When I logged into the yearbook portal later that evening, my heart sank. Where Jessica and everyone else had the standard 3 photo options, I had a gallery. Over 30 photos. I clicked through them one by one, my unease growing with each new image. The first few seemed normal enough. Typical yearbook poses, though more artistically shot than usual, but as I continued scrolling, they changed. Close-ups of my face, my hands, my eyes. Artistic black and white shots that felt intimate. I didn't even remember him taking most of these. My mouth went dry as I continued clicking through. In one image, I noticed something in the background, something that shouldn't have been there. I leaned closer to my screen, squinting. It was a small mirror, probably left there along with other drama club props. It was barely visible in the frame, and in that mirror's reflection, perfectly captured, was Mark. Not looking through his camera as he should have been, but staring directly at me. His eyes were wide, hungry, fixated on me rather than the composition. I clicked to the next photo with the same mirror showing in it. Another captured moment of him watching me when I thought I was just posing for a camera. My hands trembled as I reported everything to Principal Winters the next afternoon. She called the photography company and found out that Mark was an on and off freelancer who had quit due to a disagreement with the manager. I think Principal Winters didn't want things to affect the school's reputation, so she reassured me that it was just an uncomfortable encounter and I shouldn't think much of it. But I couldn't get that bad aftertaste out of my mind. It's like when you know something bad has happened to you, but you couldn't have been sure in that moment, and someone took advantage of that uncertainty. Sometimes when I'm alone, I imagine him scrolling through those photos of me, studying every detail. I wonder if he's still got backups somewhere. I wonder if he's shooting other students now at other schools. I wonder if someone else is feeling that same crawling sensation under their skin that I felt that day. The sensation of being watched, catalogued, collected. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd called the number on that card. Story 2. The Janitor's Closet. It was mid-May, final exams week at Lakeside High. I was a sophomore and desperate to pass my chemistry final. The chemistry lab was always locked after hours, but everyone knew Mr. Powell, the night janitor, would let you in if you asked nicely. I found Mr. Powell mopping near the science wing around 4:30 p.m. Most students had already gone home, their absence creating a hollow quietness that echoed through the building. The squeak of his mop against the linoleum tiles sounded unnaturally loud in the empty hallway. "Can I use lab photo study? Promise I won't touch anything important," I pleaded. Mr. Powell, a quiet man in his 60s with thick glasses and stooped shoulders, hesitated before nodding. 30 minutes, Ella. I need to lock up soon." He unlocked the lab, the keys jangling metallically in the silence, then continued mopping down the hall. I spread my notes across a lab table and tried to memorize electron configurations. I lost track of the time. A while later, I realized I needed my textbook from my locker. I ran to get it, my footsteps slapping against the floor in a rhythm that seemed to emphasize how alone I was. When I returned, the lab door was locked, the handle cold and unyielding in my hand. Frustrated, I went looking for Mr. Powell. The hallways were eerily quiet and much darker than before. Most of the overhead lights had been switched to night mode, leaving dim patches between pools of brightness. The air felt different too. Cooler, heavier, carrying the sharp scent of industrial floor cleaner and something else I couldn't quite place. "Mr. Powell," I called out, my voice smaller than I intended, bouncing off the metal lockers. No answer. The silence seemed to press in on me, broken only by the distant hum of the building's central air system and the occasional pop of cooling metal. I hugged my textbook to my chest as I continued down the corridor, the shadows growing longer with each step. But then I heard it, faint whistling coming from around the corner. The tune was unfamiliar, slightly off-key, drifting through the empty hallway like a ghost. Following the sound, I found a door labeled maintenance storage, slightly ajar. A thin slice of yellow light spilled onto the floor. I knocked lightly, the sound unexpectedly loud in the silent corridor. "Mr. Powell." The chemistry lab got locked. The whistling stopped abruptly, cutting off mid-note. Then came a strange, almost imperceptible sound, something between a sigh and a whisper, before complete silence fell again. "Hello." I pushed the door open wider and peered into the dimly lit closet. Cleaning supplies lined metal shelves. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward me. The room smelled of dust and bleach and something musty. Mr. Powell must be in the back, I thought, stepping inside. But as soon as I entered, the door swung shut behind me with a definitive click that seemed to echo in my chest. The air changed instantly, becoming stale, confined, pressing against my skin. I spun around and grabbed the handle, my heart pounding. Locked, from the other side of the door. "Hello, anyone there?" I called, knocking on the door. "I'm stuck in here." Silence, a dense, waiting kind of silence. Then, footsteps, but not approaching, walking away. Slow, measured steps that didn't sound like Mr. Powell's usual shuffling gait. "Hey, wait." I pounded harder, my fist stinging against the metal door. The footsteps stopped. After a moment, they slowly returned, stopping right outside the door. No voice responded to my calls, just the sound of breathing audible even through the door. Slow, deliberate breathing, right on the other side. "Mr. Powell, is that you? Can you unlock the door?" My voice cracked, betraying my rising panic. No response, just breathing. In, out, in, out. The knob turned slightly, then stopped. A few seconds passed, each one stretching like hours as sweat beaded on my forehead. The knob turned again, this time completing a full rotation. But the door remained closed. "Who's there?" My voice was barely a whisper now. The overhead bulb flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I heard a soft scraping sound against the door, like fingernails dragging across the surface. My breath caught in my throat. The door opened just a crack. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of the hallway, and something else, something sharp and unpleasant, like wet metal. "Thank you," I whispered, relief flooding through me despite my fear. I reached for the opening, but my hand touched something else, long scrawny fingers, ice cold and rough, that didn't match Mr. Powell's work-worn hands. They wrapped around my wrist with surprising strength. I screamed and yanked my hand back, stumbling deeper into the closet, knocking against shelves. Bottles and cans clattered to the floor around me as I pressed myself against the back wall, trembling. The door slammed shut again. The lock clicked with dreadful finality, and then silence, broken only by my ragged breathing and racing heartbeat thundering in my ears. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I dropped it twice before managing to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the cluttered space around me and the shadows that seemed to move just at the edge of my vision. I called 911, whispering my location through lips that felt numb with fear. The dispatcher told me to stay put. Every minute felt like an eternity as I huddled in the corner, jumping at every creak of the building, every rustle or tap that might be those fingers reaching for me again. After what seemed like hours, I heard multiple voices and flashlight beams appeared under the door. "Ella, this is Officer Jack. Are you okay in there?" When they opened the door, they found me huddled in the corner, arms wrapped around my knees, voice hoarse from crying. Mr. Powell had locked up and left an hour ago. He was already at his home. He was called back to school after the police arrived, and his neighbors confirmed he'd reached home at his usual time. The police searched the building, but found no intruder. They never caught him, whoever he was. They suggested I might have imagined the fingers, a panic response to being accidentally locked in. But I know what I felt. Whenever I passed that storage closet during school hours, surrounded by the safety of crowds and daylight, I get flashes from that night. The breathing on the other side of the door, the precise moment the light went out, and most of all, those cold fingers reaching for me in the darkness. I still feel them sometimes in my dreams, wrapping around my wrist, pulling me into that closet, back into the dark, and I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been able to pull away. Story 3. The Music Room Escape. "I bet you can't stay all night," said Danny, my best friend since 7th grade. It was a stupid challenge, but as a freshman trying to prove myself, I couldn't back down. River Hill High's Halloween lock-in ended at midnight, but we had planned to hide and stay until morning. The 5 of us thought we were so clever. We'd sneak into the auditorium tech booth after the lock-in ended and wait for everyone to leave. The plan worked perfectly. By 12:30, the teachers were gone, and the night custodian had locked up. We listened to his footsteps fade away, the jingle of his keys growing distant, followed by the heavy thud of the main entrance doors and the electronic beep of the security system being armed. We were alone in the massive school building. "Let's explore," Ava suggested, her flashlight beam dancing across the ceiling, illuminating dust particles that swirled like spectral dancers. We moved through darkened hallways, our footsteps echoing. The familiar corridors seemed transformed at night, longer, colder, watchful. The rows of lockers cast strange, repetitive shadows that resembled prison bars. The trophy case gleamed eerily in our flashlight beams, the silver figures seeming to move slightly when viewed from the corner of the eye. "This is so different at night," Lily whispered, her voice tight. "It's like the building knows we shouldn't be here." That was exactly it, a feeling of trespassing, not just against school rules, but against some unspoken boundary between day and night, between the living school and its sleeping self. "Anyone want to see the pool in the dark?" Danny suggested, his voice too loud in the silence. But as we turned toward the gym wing, a distant sound stopped us in our tracks, the sound of faint music drifting through the empty hallways. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. My skin prickled, tiny hairs standing on end. "Probably just the custodian's radio," Max whispered unconvincingly. The custodian left. Lily reminded him, her voice barely audible. The sound came again, clearer this time. A piano, playing what sounded like classical music, coming from the music wing. The notes floated through the air, delicate yet somehow intrusive, like an uninvited guest. "Someone's messing with us." Danny said, nudging my shoulder, though I could feel a slight tremor in his touch. Right, I shrugged, trying to appear calmer than I felt. My heart hammered against my ribs. Curiosity overcame fear, and we decided to investigate, creeping toward the music room. As we approached, the melody became more distinct, a haunting piece that seemed to rise and fall in waves, played with deliberate precision. We found ourselves outside the double doors to the band room, pressing our ears against the cool wood. The music was unmistakable now, nighttime-sounding music, the keys being struck with remarkable clarity. On 3, Danny whispered, hand on the door handle, his face pale in the glow of our flashlights. 1, 2. The music stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so profound it felt physical, pressing against our ears. We stood frozen, not breathing. Then Danny pushed the door open with a soft creak that seemed to reverberate through the darkness. The band room was dark except for moonlight streaming through tall windows, casting rectangular patterns on the floor. Rows of empty chairs faced the conductor's podium, their shadows stretching toward us like beckoning figures. Instrument cases lined the walls, their shapes strangely human-like in the dim light. And at the far end, spotlighted by a beam of moonlight, the grand piano stood with its lid raised, but no one was sitting at it. Someone was just playing. Ava whispered, her voice shaking. Maybe they left through the practice room door. Lily suggested, though none of us had heard it open. We moved cautiously into the room, flashlight beams sweeping across empty corners. The silence had a weight to it now, a presence that seemed to watch us as we disturbed its domain. I approached the piano, drawn to it despite my fear. Running my fingers lightly over the keys, I pulled back in shock. It's still warm, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Suddenly, the light in the adjacent practice rooms turned on, a harsh fluorescent glare cutting through the darkness. We panicked, bunching together in the center of the room. My heart lurched so violently I felt dizzy. Hello, Max called out, voice cracking. Is someone there? Silence. Then a chair scraped against the floor in one of the practice rooms, a long, deliberate sound that raised goosebumps on my arms. We should go, I urged, backing toward the exit, the taste of fear metallic in my mouth. As we turned to leave, it happened. The piano played a perfect G minor chord, loud and deliberate, the notes hanging in the air like a pronouncement. We spun around, a collective gasp escaping our lips. No one was there. Run, Danny shouted, his voice breaking. We sprinted into the hallway, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly across the walls, our footsteps thundering in the silence. It was only when we reached the main corridor that Lily grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Wait, where's Max? I hadn't noticed him fall behind. Max, I called, my voice echoing back at me from the empty hallways. No answer, just that terrible, listening silence. He was just here, Ava whispered, her face pale as bone in the flashlight glow. We reluctantly headed back toward the band room, calling for Max in hushed voices. The door stood open just as we'd left it, the room exactly as before, empty, silent. The piano lid still raised, but when Danny shone his flashlight toward the piano, we saw something that filled me with a creeping, icy horror. Sheet music on the stand that hadn't been there before. The pages were yellowed, the notation handwritten in faded ink. A sudden crack of thunder outside made us jump, our screams echoing through the room. Lightning flashed, illuminating the space in stark white for a split second, and in that moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure seated at the piano, hands poised over the keys, head turned toward us. We ran blindly, terror giving us speed. In the main hallway, we collided with Max, who had apparently slipped and fallen behind when we first fled. I've been looking everywhere for you guys, he gasped. We didn't stop to explain, just grabbed him and kept running. In our panic, we triggered the service door's alarm, a shrill, wailing sound that seemed to chase us through the corridors. The night security guard caught us by the front entrance. 2 weeks of detention was our punishment for the stunt, but none of us cared about that. We were just relieved to be out of that building. We never told anyone about the piano or the sheet music. Who would believe us? But sometimes, passing the band room during school hours, I'll hear some student practicing. An imperfect G minor chord progression maybe, and the hair on the back of my neck would rise. And I wonder if they know, maybe they could feel it too, that they're not alone in there. That's the end of today's stories. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in a seemingly normal place like a school? What happened and how did you react? Let me know in the comments below the like and subscribe buttons.